Mortal Kombat has definitely become one of the most famous and one of the most controversial video game franchises of all time. And while nowadays it might seem as commonplace for them to cross over with DC Comics, it actually wasn't always like this. This whole trend actually started with a little game called Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. And if you haven't heard of it, I don't blame you, because it was awful. The gameplay was just bad, and what they basically tried doing was making Mortal Kombat appeal to a more wider audience than people over the age of 18, and try to get a bunch of people that complained about the violence to stop doing it by crossing over with DC Comics. And they failed miserably. This game was awful. But luckily, a couple of years later, they decided to try this again, and this time they ended up succeeding. This is how we got Injustice, one of the best licensed fighting games of all time, and today we're going to be talking about it. Okay, so this game was definitely much improved upon from its predecessor. One of the reasons is that this game had a lot more time put into it. The previous game was rushed to reach a strict deadline. This one wasn't. More time was put into it, and people actually cared about making it, which resulted in a much better end product. And I would say that they made a successful toned-down version of Mortal Kombat. One thing which I really enjoyed was the storyline, because it's absolutely stellar, and it was even adapted into its own comic book series. Now, going into this storyline, I expected it to be overly complicated, and I really don't know why. That's just how I got the impression of it. But I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would, because it's really not overly complicated. It's just a good story. And the story is that the Justice League ends up in an alternate universe where Superman and the Justice League of that universe has turned evil. And the reason because of this is because Joker made Superman accidentally kill his wife Lois Lane, so then Superman killed the Joker. Then Superman decides that the way to fully get rid of criminals and stop them from doing anything bad ever again is to kill them. And this goes against Batman and a few other heroes' ideals, so they start a revolution against the evil Superman and the heroes which agree with him. And then the Justice League of the main universe teams up with them to take down Superman. So it is sort of complicated, but it's still very much enjoyable. So the gameplay is basically separated into a few different modes which you can play. Now, as for these modes, I actually kind of don't like them. A lot of them are pretty forgettable and boring. But that doesn't mean the gameplay itself within the modes isn't exactly bad, because the only one people normally care about is just the arcade mode. I forgot what it was called in this game, but I'm just going to call it arcade mode. And yeah, the arcade mode gameplay is basically you pick a hero and you fight a bunch of dudes before you get to a boss battle. And honestly, this could easily take up a lot of time, which is a good thing because it gives you something to do in the game after you've beaten the main story. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And at the end of them, you even get a cool little cutscene. So that's also really great. Now, as for the fighting, it's basically like Mortal Kombat's fighting, with a few obvious tweaks, such as toned-down violence, especially for the fatalities, or super moves as they are called in this game. The developers really had to think outside the box to make the fatalities non-brutal, and I really think they did a good job and used the characters' unique abilities to create a really cool and unique move. Which, by the way, was done incredibly poorly in DC Universe vs. Mortal Kombat. The fatalities in that game were just awful. What basically happened in each fatality was just anticlimactic. They would do something incredibly lame, which somehow ended their opponent. And they didn't even use the character's creative abilities in most of them. It was just awful. Now, one thing that I would have really liked to see is a longer storyline. Now, the storyline that they have is perfect. There isn't really anything too bad about it, except for the fact that it's sort of short and you can easily finish it in one day in just a few hours, unless you get stuck on a level, then it'll take you longer. But still, the storyline is still sort of short, and the thing is, if they would have made it longer, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, because I like games with longer storylines. Now, if in order to do this, they might have had to add a whole bunch of filler and stuff, but if there was a way that they could do this without having filler and with it still being a good story, I would have really enjoyed it. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about the graphics. One thing that I really enjoyed about the graphics is the character designs. Because in most DC comic storylines, when they're trying to tell a serious story, they're being told while the characters are wearing the same outfits they were wearing during the Golden Age and Silver Age, and it's just really hard to take seriously. But in this game, they improved on that by making the character designs actually seem practical, making their costumes seem practical and useful in battle by going for this armory, military type aesthetic to them. Now obviously they still have to look like the characters, so there are still a few silly elements in there, but still, it makes me take the story a lot more seriously than if they were wearing their Silver/Golden Age outfits. Alright guys, so my overall thoughts on this game is that it's definitely a really good game. And let's say you're a little kid watching this and you can't play Mortal Kombat, definitely try this game, because it's a toned down version of Mortal Kombat, and there's also a really cool DC storyline involved with it. So yeah guys, that'll be pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Hit that like button, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.